Hello learners, today in this session we are discussing on watershed management. In the previous session we had a quick look into landscape ecology and how landscape ecology is important for bringing sustainable development and achieving SDG. So if you link with that landscape ecology, you will see that watershed management or watershed is also part of landscape. If you look from the water resources point of view only. In which we are going to touch upon when we talk about watershed management, first and the foremost thing we need to understand is what exactly watershed is and its major characteristic from watershed management point of view, and then concept of watershed management and what are the approaches which we have to follow this management of watershed. As we know that the development of land and water resources cannot be considered independent of each other when we talk about sustainable natural resource management. In the case of natural water resources, and specifically for management purpose, the natural boundary where close interaction occur among the users, the resources, and the institution that govern access to the resources needs to be considered as a single unit. Because when we talk about the management, when we talk about the resources, we need to find out a unit. And so watershed is a single unit which covers the area that naturally drain the water into a stream, river, lake or wetland. It is a synonym for the catchment or the basin of the river. In simple language, it is a specific land area from which all precipitation, rainfall as well as snowfall, this flows into a single channel or a stream or river. It is a basin-like landform defined by high points ridge lines that descend and into lower elevation and stream valleys. So you will see here, this is a watershed. You will see this river that stacks itself by passing through different hillocks. This is an example of watershed, right? You will see here. This is a watershed, watershed at Uttarakhand. Then this is also a watershed you will find out that is in the Jamnotri. The fact is that the supply of world's fresh water, that depends largely on people's capacity to manage flows. On the other hand, you will see the land fertility in particular and food security in general are largely depend on upland water and the sediments. So in this context, watershed ecology has a vital role to play in sustainable development. It is not only generate environment and public goods, including regulation of water flow and quality, nutrient and sediment delivery, but also maintain the landscape beauty. That's why I mentioned in the beginning that watershed is a part of landscape. And when we talk about watershed ecology, it has a close link with the previous session on landscape ecology, right? So in this figure, you will find out that upper tributary watershed, apart from being habitat for in situ conservation of resources like biodiversity, it also provides ecosystem goods and services value at different levels. You will see here. Go. When you look into watershed, you will find out the upper land tributary landscape is here, a hillside, sediment filtering. Then you can see up to the plot level. From the plot level, you can look, and from the plot to watershed level, then biogeographical region, then global level. These are interlinked, right? You will see in this diagram. Okay, when you look into the watershed level, you will have a sediment transport is there, then it has flood protection, then it produces timber, and if you look into the global perspective, the ecosystem function of this watershed is carbon sequestration value, then biodiversity. So watershed, the value of watershed or the health of watershed is directly related to other ecosystem services at different scale from local to global. So that's why managing in efficient way of watershed is very important for achieving sustainable development or sustainable development goals, in particular in this era of SDGs. So watershed management has therefore emerged as a new paradigm for planning, development, and management of land, water, and biomass resources, taking into account social, institutional, and biophysical aspects, adopting a participatory bottom-up approach. Then what are the characteristics of watershed? If we look from watershed management point of view, we will not go in details, but if you look from watershed management point of view, we will see that no two watersheds are identical. When I show in the beginning of this slide, you will see in these two watersheds, that is in Uttarakhand Himalaya, you will see the shape and this size is very different from one watershed to another watershed. Okay, so all the characteristics of that particular watershed or different watershed, they have different characteristics. That characteristics affect the disposal of water. Then what are the important characteristics? Characteristics are first and foremost is size, shape, physiography, slope, climate, drainage system, then the land use, vegetation structure, geology in the soil, then hydrology, hydrogeology, and at last, the socio-economic condition or socio-economic characteristic of that particular watershed. So let us have a quick look into this characteristic. When we talk about the size, the size of watershed forms a basis for further classification into different categories. And you know that two watersheds will never equal in terms of size, in terms of shape. So in terms of size, then according one of the academic, Professor Bali, 1980, gave the nomenclature into sub-watershed where the size of watershed is 100 to 500 square kilometers as sub-watershed. If it is 10 to 100 square kilometer, then milli-watershed. If it is between 1 to 10 square kilometer, then micro-watershed. And it is mini-watershed when the watershed is less than 1 square kilometer. The size in watershed, it helps in computing many parameters like precipitation receive, retain, and drain off. Because when we talk about watershed management, we need to understand different parameters. All parameters are interrelated to each other. Larger the watershed, more is the heterogeneity of other characteristics. Then next is shape. Watersheds differ in their shape based on the morphometric parameters like geology and structure, and most of the general shapes are pear, elongated, triangular, circular, etc. The shape of the watershed determines the length-width ratio, which affects the runoff characteristics like runoff time. Another important characteristic is physiography, means type of lands, its altitude, and the physical disposition that immensely speak about the watersheds as to the climate and the planning, the activities in greening the watershed. For example, a hilly tract could be useful mainly for forestry, and the plains or populated areas could be utilized only for crops. So physiography is also one of the important characteristics of watershed for effective implementation of watershed management. Then comes to slope. The slope controls rainfall distribution and the movement, land utilization, and watershed behavior. The degree of slope affects the velocity of overland flow and the runoff, infiltration rate, and thus soil transportation. So slope is also very important character. We need to understand this. Climate. Meteorological parameters like precipitation, temperature, wind velocity, humidity, and evaporation decide a quantitative approach for arriving at water availability in a watershed. When we talk of watershed, the important key to watershed management is to manage the availability of water. So climate is a determining factor for the management of all aspects of watershed because it is directly related to your other characteristic. For example, the interior planning of greenery depends on the climate. The next one is drainage. When you look into watershed, the odor, pattern and density of drainage have a profound influence on watershed as to runoff, infiltration, land management, etc. Right? So it determines, the drainage determines the flow characteristic and thus erosional behavior. Another important characteristic is land use. The land use pattern is vital for planning, programming and implementing a management project on a watershed. It is an important statistic for ascertaining the background, appreciating the status and the planning, the programs in management. Land use portrays men's impact on a specific watershed and forms a basis for categorizing the land for the formulation of a pragmatic action plan. The next one is vegetation characteristic. The detailed information on vegetation helps in choosing type, mode and a manner of greening the watershed. And information on local species, it gives a sure ground for selecting plants and crops. So we need to understand the natural vegetation characteristic of the watershed. Geology in the soil is also very important characteristic. Rocks and the their structure control the formation of watershed itself because their nature determines the size, shape, physiography, drainage and groundwater condition. So we need to understand the geology. As you know, soils is a derivative of rocks. They are basic to greening or biomass of that watershed. So soil parameters like depth, nature, moisture and fertility determines the crops. Rocks and the soil together influence the water storage, movement and infiltration. Hydrology as a characteristic is availability of water, quality and distribution of surface water is basic to the final goal of growing vegetation or greenery in a watershed. Like hydrological parameters, and these hydrological parameters help in quantification of water available, utilize and additional exploitable resources means potential of these resources for greening the area, vegetating the area. So they determine the location and design of conservation structure. So we need to understand hydrology, basic hydrological characteristic. Hydrogeology is also very important because the appreciation of groundwater resources for determining their further availability in the context of conjunctive use of water resources for greening the specific watershed is a logical prelude. So the information should not only include nature, thickness and characteristics of aquifer, but also contain quantity available for additional exploitation through specific number of wells. Last one is socioeconomics. Data on the sociocultural, economic and health aspect of the local communities, as also their cropping pattern, animal husbandry tradition, they are very required and a key characteristic for implementing watershed management. So these are the basic characteristics we need to understand from watershed management point of view. Then what is watershed management? Watershed management involves, as we know, managing the land, water, energy, vegetation in the area that takes into account the relation or that is related to socio-economic and technological component. Based on the scale of watershed management, it is differently known or termed across the world. For example, in the Americas, it is termed as river basin management. In Europe, it is termed as catchment management. So when we talk about river basin management and catchment management, it is synonymous to watershed management. So the purpose of watershed management, if you look from region to region or country to country, are depending on the regional and national priorities. These priorities are ranges from soil and water conservation, which is most of the countries, their main objective is soil and water conservation. And in countries like Afghanistan and Pakistan, their national priorities are on rangeland protection. And in case of Afghanistan and Pakistan, again, for them protecting the rivers, reservoirs for irrigation, they are the main objective, their main objective of watershed management in their region. In case of Nepal and Bhutan, it is protection of reservoirs like hydel plants. In case of Sri Lanka, enhancing ecosystem services. And if you look into India in the beginning, the major objective of watershed management and major purpose is improving land productivity in rain-fed regions, means irrigation. So, major objective watershed management are, if you look into the priorities across the world, the major objective of watershed management are conserving soil and water, improving the ability of land to hold water, then rainwater harvesting and resourcing, growing greenery like trees, crops and grasses, developing, managing and sustaining production systems that are well suited to the existing environment and resource base and that can be sustained for future generation. Sustaining or increasing supplies of high quality water and improving the quality of water in streams, lakes and other water bodies. Preventing excessive soil erosion to protect the production potential of the land and reduce downstream sedimentation. Rehabilitating watershed lanes, stream channels, wetlands and riparian systems that have become degraded. These are some of the major objectives. Then approaches. When you talk about the objective, if you look into literature, you will find out that there have been many variations in the concept, objective and implementation mechanism of watershed programs over the last 70 years across the globe. For example, you will see evolution of that modern watershed management in South Asia. The purpose and approach are different from country to country. These are some of the compilation of one author Reddy et al. In 2017. Here, in this table, you will see how the watershed management in South Asia was evolved in terms of approaches. In 1970s in Bangladesh, they started integrated watershed management. 1980s in Bhutan, you will see the purpose of Bhutan is protection of reservoirs. In India, 1970s, the purpose of watershed management in India was enhancing the productivity and reducing gill vulnerability in the rain-fed region. When we talk about in Nepal, you will see 1970s, in the period of 1970s, their major purpose of this watershed management is protection of reservoir, means hydel, and protection of forests and their livelihood. In that also, most of the country they follow participatory and integrated watershed management. In Pakistan, 1980s, their purpose was also protection of reservoirs for irrigation and protection of rangelands. In that also, you will find out all the approaches are same, more or less same. In Sri Lanka, their main approach or their main purpose was protection of reservoirs for irrigation, upstream soil protection, water quality. So, looking into the approaches which was followed by different countries, especially what I have given an example based on a review paper here on the evolution of watershed management in South Asia. For this session, we'll discuss only two major basic approaches. One is sectoral approach of watershed management. Another is integrated watershed management approach. What is sectoral approach for watershed management? In this sectoral approach of watershed management, activities targeted for particular sectors such as soil conservation are considered. Means their major objective of watershed management is sector basis. So most of the watershed management projects taken up during 1970s and 80s in developing countries were from a sectoral approach. Land improvement, soil and water conservation, and the forest management in mountain areas were the main aim of those projects during under this watershed sectoral approach to watershed management. So since it is most of the watershed management project in that time you will see soil conservation was the priority, and to achieve the soil conservation, some of the activities like counterbunding, landslides, and gully control through application of various techniques, we are more focused under this sectoral approach for watershed management. Some of the examples are the Mahabali scheme in Sri Lanka, the Tarbela Dam in Pakistan. They are the example of largest sectoral approach irrigation project in the world during the 1970s. But it is realized that sectoral approach in watershed is no longer appropriate, since each sector constitutes an independent entity within the administrative and bureaucratic system, although watershed components, as we know, such as land, water, vegetation, livestock, and human activities are inherently interlinked to each other. You cannot see watershed only through the lens of land, only through the lens of water, only through the lens of vegetation. You cannot isolate. So sectoral approach is not an effective solution. So there is a need for integrated management strategies and implementation across different implementing agencies and stakeholders, keeping better sustainability of land, water, and socioeconomic resources to ensure improvement in environmental quality and human welfare. So, integrated watershed management approach, which was specially, you will find out in the late 1980s, is the forerunner for sustainable rural development, and it was advocated again at the 1992 Rio Summit. Integrated watershed management approach as defined by United Nations Environment Programme in 2004 is defined as a comprehensive multi-resource management planning processes involving all stakeholders within the watershed together as a group towards identifying the watershed's resource issues and concerns, as well as developing and implementing a watershed plan with solutions that are environmentally, socially, and economically sustainable. So in this, effective local participation is one of the key processes to the sustainability of watershed management. When we follow that sectoral approach also, if you look into the evolution of watershed management in Asia, you will find out participation was very much part of that, though it may be in terms of the effectiveness that there may be difference, but local community participation was very much there in that time also. The traditional knowledge-based indigenous technology needs to be blended with modern technology with help from external experts. Here, the external expert also need to understand the existing age-old practices in that locality. And the role of external experts should be to inform and educate the rural community, demonstrate to them the benefits of watershed development. And those programs essentially should be planned and implemented locally by the rural community. So the strategies in integrated watershed management programs include land configuration system, agronomic measures, alternate land use system, runoff harvesting and recycling methods, and measures for control of mass erosion problems. Some of the technologies for watershed management in the upper catchment include that we will find out very easily in the literature: organic mulching, conservation bench terrace system, horticulture development valley and other suitable lands, low density polyethylene film line tank for supplemental irrigation that is very common in most of the mountain area, especially when I travel across Uttarakhand, it's very common here. Construction of sack dams and planting grasses in the lower foothill, that's also very common in India. We'll find out in most of the integrated watershed management practices approaches in India. Then agri-silvi horticultural system for irrigated lands, and mushroom and off-season vegetable cultivation in low-cost poly houses. So local livelihood systems are the most direct link between human population and the watershed. That's why we always talk about, no, you will not isolate the socio-economic condition from that of the health of your watershed. So an efficient watershed management intervention is not possible without taking into consideration local people and without understanding their basic livelihood system. If we look into many of the success stories on watershed management, we'll find out that they are of integrated and a community-based participatory approach. So in today's session, if we summarize the session, then we can summarize in this way that the watershed, being a natural hydrological entity, they respond effectively to various engineering, biological, cultural treatment design to maximize efficiency in resource use. As we know, watershed management involves managing land, water, energy and greenery in the area, taking into account the related socio-economic and technological components. So properly managed watershed leads to sustainable management of water, soil and vegetation, providing to the rural population self-sustaining food, water, fiber, firewood, fodder, health and welfare. Thus, in effect, a sustainable livelihood without ecological harm is created for the local communities because of effective watershed management. As we know that watershed lies at the height spreading down up to the coastal tracts, you will find out that, for example, if you look into large river system like Ganga, Yamuna, and Brahmaputra, you will find out their watershed is spreading up to the coastal tracts. The conservation measures for the lower catchment will be more effective when the upper watersheds are well protected. For example, the uncontrolled runoff from the upper reaches may hamper conservation measures taken in the lower catchment. Watershed management should necessarily commence from upper reaches and progressively proceed towards lower levels. So it must ensure integrated development of different parts of the watershed in accordance with their nature, problems, potentiality and sustainability. So in today's session, we have touched upon the basic of watershed, its characteristic, then the concept of watershed management and evolution of watershed management in Asian context in very brief. Then the approaches, two major approaches was discussed in brief. One is sectoral approaches of watershed management, the another is integrated watershed management approach. So these are some of the references which I have used for this session. With this, we'll meet in the second session, which is also in another session, which is also on watershed management and sustainable development. With this, let us meet in second session. Thanks all.